Oh,
Let's see the person sitting here. Oh, there we go.
good afternoon. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Labor, Health, Social Services Committee for the 20th day of January. Be our second committee meeting. We have one committee bill before us. Just to give a heads up to the public that may be tuning in, on Wednesday, we will have our final committee bill, and then we will have Senator Crumb's bill, certificate and need bill. So we'll have the immunity bill and the Senator Crumb's bill. So that is scheduled for Wednesday. And if it works as the standard practice for the committee, we'll continue to do this half hour for lunch recess, and then we'll convene. So I'll try to announce for the committee members and the public, when we break, it'll be a half an hour from then that we'll convene down here on Wednesday. Good. Well, I appreciate that. All right. So the first bill for the only bill for our consideration today, committee and members of the public, thank you for being here, is Senate File 36. This was a product of the Joint Interim Committee. I'll give a little bit of background. Only Senator Hutchings and myself were on the committee that are on this committee, on the last committee. This was a bill, it was an interim topic that was assigned to us. It started off as a full licensure bill, and then it got pared back through the subsequent meetings to a bill that just basically recognizes there is such a thing and defines what they are and does not have a licensure provision, et cetera. And you'll note that it is actually an exclusionary bill, not an inclusionary bill, meaning it says, if you don't have these categories, you cannot say you're this, and we'll have a discussion about that. Just as another heads up, I think I see 4 Practice Act bills coming to us. There are 4 that have been either introduced or are still out for co-sponsors. And excuse me, I won't go into which ones are which, but there are 4 that actually are true licensure bills with licensure boards and all of that. So they are a much greater breadth of discussion as far as the bill itself than this bill being a approximately two-page bill. So with that, does anybody have any questions about the interim? This is what came out of the interim, and like I said, it was pared back significantly throughout the interim. If not, let's, who's going to lead? Probably Ms. Camino. All of our, the folks that are really worked a lot on this and have talked about, a lot of them are from far away places, meaning St. John's in Teton County, which is in Wyoming, and the travel conditions didn't make it. She felt like she could make it here and keep her work schedule. So we'll start with Ms. Camino. I have 3 people on the list. If we could start with Ms. Camino, and then we'll go to Ms. Malone, and then Ms. Moore. So we'll go in that order, and you can let them all in if you want, at your pleasure. So whoever comes on first, it'll be Ms. Camino. If you just introduce yourself, give us a little background, and then if you would like to lay out your profession's interest in the bill and what the bill does. So welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself, and thank you for being here. I should note for the roll quickly, Senator Steinmetz is excused. The rest of us are here. My apologies. Go ahead, Ms. Camino.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Hillary Camino. You can hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you. Like Senator said, I'm a music therapist. I grew up in Cheyenne, Wyoming, currently living in Jackson. So thank you so much for having me here remotely. I'm here representing the Wyoming Music Therapy Task Force in support of the Music Therapy Title Protection Bill. There are currently 11 practicing music therapists in the state of Wyoming, the majority of whom are on the task force and all of whom support this bill. 18 other states offer some form of state recognition for music therapists, including Utah, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Nevada, and others. This bill ensures that the title of music therapist is reserved for qualified professionals, ultimately safeguarding the well-being of our most vulnerable populations, and that includes children with developmental disabilities, premature infants in NICUs, children and adults on the autism spectrum, individuals with late-stage dementia and memory care units, among many other vulnerable populations that music therapists work with. So this bill doesn't disallow anyone from using music with others. It simply reserves the title of a music therapist for those who are credentialed to practice and provide music therapy services, which is different than music as entertainment and community music. This is a bill that will increase access to consumers in need of music therapy services across the state. And it will ensure that those offering the music therapy services are educated and trained in how to do so. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Camino. Would you give just a little historical perspective as how long this profession has, I mean, music is important for, generations, but this particular modality of therapy, how long that's been in practice, and then you've already kind of mentioned the places where it's in practice, but anything else just to allow the committee to just a little more background on, how long, where these schools are, where the general areas of practice are, et cetera, please.
Yes, thank you, Senator. The music therapy profession has been around since the 1950s and was instituted after World War II, and we saw the benefits of having musicians in hospitals, and so it was more formally recognized after that. And as we started to see the benefit of music and wanted to formally make it a profession where you need a bachelor's degree or higher in music therapy to practice and to be nationally certified to practice, so that musicians go through a certain amount of training, the mental health, different interventions to help people with physical challenges, cognition, and social benefits. So we're trained in all of these areas to help people who are in need in those areas. So music therapists work in many places. I work at a hospital here in Jackson and service mostly people in long-term care and memory care and those in acute care. Music therapists also work in daycares, in nursing homes, in special schools, special education, many different places. And it's important for us to be trained in how to work with individuals to make sure that we're providing interventions, musical interventions that help our patients and clients be safe and make sure that we're providing music in a way that is of health benefit to them. And like I said earlier, this doesn't necessarily mean that there's a spectrum. So I work more in a clinical space with people with healthcare needs, and a community musician works into other spaces and can come in and provide entertainment for people. I'm providing a treatment, which is I get a referral, and like physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, I go through a treatment process where I have goals aligned with the individuals that I'm working with. And so I implement those goals, and I'm constantly collecting information and data from our sessions and implementing my services, and then evaluating, and then ultimately terminating treatment similar to other treatment modalities. I hope that it's a lot to discuss, and so I welcome any questions.
Yep, thank you very much. That was a helpful overview. Committee members, any questions for Ms. Camino? Senator Scott.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, page 2, line 22 and 23, credential granted by the Certification Board for Musical Therapists. What is the Certification Board for Musical Therapists, and is this defined anywhere else in Wyoming statute?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Camino, and it is not defined elsewhere in statute, but go ahead, Ms. Camino. Who are they? And we can talk about the potential.
Thank you, Senator. The Certification Board for Music Therapists is a national certification board, the governing body of music therapists. We actually have a representative, Kimberly Sena-Moore, on this call if you'd like her to explain more about CBMT and the role of CBMT for music therapists across the nation.
Okay, thank you. Senator Scott, anything further from the committee members? Yes, Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Camino, wondering about the way the bill has been written as a prohibition, where in Wyoming do you find that this is an issue? Who is preventing you from going in along with other people that may just want to go in and, like, say, for instance, me, when my mother was dying, I brought in a cassette and played her favorite songs. And I know you say that this doesn't touch on that, but I wasn't prevented. I didn't say I was a musical therapist. I just went in. So again, where are you finding an issue here in Wyoming that we need to crack open our statutes to just include this prohibition? Thank you.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Camino, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the question, Senator Hutchings. Like I said, this does not disallow anyone from using music. We certainly want people to be using music and providing musical experiences for folks. This is more to prevent those from calling themselves a music therapist and therefore charging as a music therapist. It's a treatment model. So it's not just offering musical entertainment. It's more of a treatment model. And the purpose of this bill is really just to validate the role of a music therapist. And thus being, once we're state recognized, will create more opportunities for music therapists in the state to practice and provide services where there are not currently services being provided for Wyoming residents.
Senator Hutchings, follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you said the operative word, you want validation in the career choice you've chosen. And that's what I was thinking when I heard this over the summer. You want validation that, hey, I'm a musical therapist, I have a license, but again, where are you being prevented from going into a nursing home, school, whatever, as a musical therapist, since you are licensed, you have credentials. So where, if any place, are you being prevented to go in as a credentialed musical therapist? And where have you heard of anybody saying, hey, I'm a credentialed musical therapist, I'm coming into the hospital to do whatever? Thank you.
Ms. Camino.
Thank you, Chairman. I have heard of people throughout the state going into facilities. We've heard it primarily in nursing homes, saying that they are providing music therapy services. And this is more not malicious in any way. I think it's just a lack of education and understanding about the profession of music therapy. And so we want to make it clear in state statute that music therapy is a profession and needs to be credentialed in order to practice. I have not personally been prohibited from offering my services. However, it has taken me many years to create the position that I currently have because music therapy is not state recognized. And so if we had state recognition, it would allow music therapists to come into these facilities and communities to provide services much easier and more quickly to help those in need.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, my question is in terms of exactly what this bill is doing and is preventing. As I read it, anyone could come along to, say, a nursing home and say, I think having some special music would help some of your patients. I know how to do that. I'm not a musical therapist, but I know how to do that. They would be perfectly all right doing that as long as they didn't claim to be a musical therapist. Is that a correct understanding of the bill?
Ms. Camino.
Yes, Senator, you are correct.
Thank you. Any further questions, Ms. Camino? We have two more folks online, so we'll go, maybe we'll go to actually Ms. Moore first, if she happens to be online, since she's representing the national organization or the accreditation organization, I think. So Ms. Moore, if you're available, thank you, Hillary. If you're available, Ms. Moore, please proceed. Introduce yourself and then give us some background and maybe take some questions. Please proceed.
Absolutely, and good afternoon, and thank you so much for the option to provide remote testimony today in support of this title protection bill. So Senator Barlow and the rest of the committee members, I appreciate your time this afternoon. My name is Dr. Kimberly Senna Moore. I am a board certified music therapist, and I serve as Regulatory Affairs Associate for the Certification Board for Music Therapists. I'm involved in supporting music therapists like Hillary in multiple states, actually in 48 states and counting, to promote and help create some form of formal recognition of the music therapy profession and the MTBC credential required for competent practice. One of the questions that came up earlier was, what is CBMT and is it defined elsewhere in statute? CBMT, and I said this earlier, but I'll say it again, stands for the Certification Board for Music Therapists. Professional music therapists in the United States hold a bachelor's degree or higher in music therapy. The coursework to become a music therapist includes training in music, including music theory, applied lessons, music history, ensemble experience. It includes courses in psychology and social work and medical sciences. And it includes coursework in music therapy, a large part of which is fieldwork experiences. So under the supervision of a professional music therapist, a pre-professional undergraduate student gets the kind of hands-on fieldwork practice of quote unquote doing music therapy. The last step in the degree program is a 6-month clinical training internship, which is done at different health and medical and educational facilities across the country. I happen to live in Southwest Florida, and we have 4 different internship sites here locally and many, many more throughout Florida. And I believe there's some also in Wyoming, although Ms. Camino may need to correct me on that. I haven't yet to have a student go out to Wyoming. Upon successful completion of the internship and the degree, the individual is eligible for a national board certification examination. And this is where CBMT comes in. CBMT issues the MTBC, or Music Therapist Board Certified Credential. This is an indicator of quality assurance so that employers, governments, and other consumers can more easily identify who is qualified to practice music therapy. As has been mentioned already, including by Ms. Camino, and I believe Senator Hutchings, you sharing the story about how you brought in music for your mother, which I'm sure brought quite a bit of comfort to her. There's a lot of different ways music can help, but where a music therapist can come in is we have the clinical training and clinical skill set to work with some of the most vulnerable individuals, to work with premature infants in neonatal intensive care units to make sure that they're not overstimulated, and then to help their parents and help promote the bonding that is so important in those early days and early weeks, or to recognize when a song might unintentionally trigger anxiety or trauma in veterans and be able to manage those trauma responses in a safe way, or at least know if that's not within our scope to manage that because we don't have psychotherapy, to know what the policies are so that we can refer them to whoever is needed to help make sure that veteran is safe. Or to follow, infection control procedures when selecting instruments to use in a session with a cancer patient who's undergoing chemotherapy and who's immunocompromised. So there's a whole range of ways that music can help support health and wellness. And music therapy, we can work in those areas. I mean, we're kind of small and mighty. We can work in those settings and with those patients who need the most support, who have the most complex needs, and who have the most critical medical needs. And so CBMT issues the MTBC credential, which provides a way, again, to indicate that that person has the requisite knowledge and skill sets to safely and competently practice music therapy. And so through the course of the interim study that happened over the summer, as was mentioned earlier by Senator Barlow, we started with a licensure bill. And through the discussions, we shifted directions to title protection because that seemed to be a better fit in the state of Wyoming. And so I am here representing the Certification Board for Music Therapists, as well as our other national organization involved in this effort, the American Music Therapy Association. We support this bill, and we also support I think you'll be hearing some amendments to shift the exclusionary language to inclusionary language, and we support that shift as well. I hope this helped answer some of your questions and some that emerged earlier, and I'm happy to take more questions.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Any questions for Dr. Moore? Senator Crum.
Mr. Chairman, question, who would be the oversight of this if somebody goes out of bounds and would claim that they're a music therapist? Who oversees that and would enforce that rule?
Ms. Moore.
So the Certification Board for Music Therapists, and thank you for the question, does have a mechanism to review complaints, and we have it outlined in the Code of Professional Practice. One of the conversations that came over the summer and kind of the dialogue that happened during the interim session was whether or not to have some sort of penalty or fee with this particular bill, so that if someone is saying that they are a music therapist or practice music therapy, that there's some sort of mechanism in place to help enforce that. I believe, and I'm double checking in the bill language now, that through the discussions of the committee last summer was removed from this bill. So currently the main mechanism would be to submit a complaint to CBMT and CBMT to undergo our disciplinary review process.
Thank you. Senator Crum, follow up?
So in essence, there's no real accountability with this bill.
There is no
Mr.
account.
Chairman.
Go ahead. Please proceed, Dr. Moore.
Thank you, and apologies. I was very excited to answer the question. In its current version, no, there is no accountability for the individual practitioner. What this does do is define in statute for employers, consumers, and state agencies that music therapy is a treatment option. We are approaching this work by this kind of state recognition work nationally by aiming to increase access to safe and competent music therapy services. And so from that perspective, this bill is a benefit, even if it's maybe not as strong as other options are.
Thank you. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me that the national board was somewhat ineffective with their approaches, because somebody who didn't belong to their profession would just ignore them. I suspect that with this language in the Wyoming statute, that somebody who was aggrieved and who could get court standing, which might well be an employer of one of these, somebody that had hired it, if somebody advertised falsely, would have the ability to go to court and get an injunction, and possibly would have better standing if some kind of damages were done. I'm not sure what they would be, but I think an injunction against violating the law would clearly be how this one would be enforced.
Thank you. And for the committee, during the discussion throughout the interim, there were, as I said, this was a more robust licensure bill, which then if you have a licensure board, they have that kind of enforcement and all that authorities. This bill does not include that, so I think Senator Scott's observation that it's probably a civil matter, if you will, not a criminal matter per se, is appropriate. So if I see no more questions for Dr. Moore, we'll go to Ms. Malone. Ms. Malone, are you available? Okay. So Ms. Malone is not there. So any further questions for our two remote folks, and then we'll go to folks in the audience. Any further questions? All right, anybody in the committee room, physically in the committee room, like to, here, please come forward, introduce yourself, and provide your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, Joey Correnti. I'm the Executive Director of Rural Wyoming Matters. We are an informational, educational, and advocacy group in rural Wyoming. I'm also a retired combat veteran who has been exposed to a myriad of expressional art therapies. I think they're wonderful. I think they can be done right. I do have some concerns with my current position representing rural Wyoming interests and the wording of this bill. First, it's a Wyoming bill, and a lot of the therapy that we receive is over telehealth in rural Wyoming from out of state. How is that regulated by a Wyoming bill? And then a lot of the materials I receive also come from music therapist, visual art, digital art, expressive art, even dance therapy instructors from out of state, and they're just sending me CDs, DVDs, or a link. So that is a concern on how it would be enforced or regulated further than the conversation I've heard here today. But also, as I look at the language of the bill, I see words that really kind of jump out at me as concerning. Unlawful for a person to profess to be a music therapist or advertise in any form or hold themselves out to the public as a music therapist. Now, to come to the session, I drove from rural Wyoming through a couple of cities, and I don't spend much time in cities, but I saw no less than 3 signs that said, exercise your retail therapy here. We don't have big stores where I'm from. And I'm wondering at what point does the word therapy become problematic across the board in other places, and we start suing big box stores or trying to criminalize individuals who are having garage sales for using the word therapy. I'm just again concerned about the enforceability of it. And then when I step back and look at Wyoming being the equality state, and I have a personal standard of equally applied principles in all situations that are somewhat the same, all of those other modalities or types of therapy I talked about, this doesn't talk about visual art therapy. This doesn't talk about dance therapy. So you now have multiple branches of the type of therapy that aren't either being protected or restricted when the real concern seems to be the word therapy. Now, I would not disagree that if any specific organization or accreditation group out there owns the term or the acronym MTBC as it appears in the bill, then they have the right to protect that under copyright and say who is or who isn't. The same way if you got on social media, blue check mark, it's verified. I don't know that this needs to be a law, and I'm not saying that therapies aren't good and don't need to be regulated. I think it could be done more broadly, and I think that if this is seriously going to be considered, the unlawful for a person to profess to be a music therapist or advertise or hold themselves out to the public to be a music therapist could run into some First Amendment concerns. I'm also a musician. If I step out on stage and say, hey, who's ready for some music therapy? You know, am I going to have someone with a blue check mark run in and say, you can't say that, and now we're going to sue you? With that, I'll go ahead and stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Correnti. Any questions for Mr. Correnti? So actually, I have a question. You brought up something interesting. You talked about other forms of potential therapy that are art-based, if you will. Dance and visual were the two that I wrote down in my notes. Do you know are there boards, state or national boards for either dance therapy in a, I would call a healthcare setting type thing, or visual arts? I mean, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot. You brought it up, so I just am curious now if there are these other boards out there to make this bill, the broader bill that you're actually maybe describing. Thank you, Mr. Correnti. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I will continue my testimony freely, not that I feel I'm being goaded into violating HIPAA. My other situations medically prevented me, luckily, from engaging in any dance therapy. No one wants to see that. But I do know that there's an International Association of Expressive Arts Therapy group that does cover pretty much all of the branches of the tree and are always looking for new branches that may bloom. I do know that a few of the, another one I may not have mentioned, writing therapy was intensely impactful for me, and that's pretty well regulated. I believe it's called CPT. They may have different terms for who does it, but these were providers that, of course, because of how I ended up with my ailments, the VA provided me access to. So I would assume if they can get in through the VA, there's got to be some other groups that at least recognize this kind of therapy. And again, I'm not saying the therapy is bad, the groups are bad. I don't even mind exclusivity when it can be, constituted as this is what we do, it's recognized, you have to do it. But to say we're going to own the words and we're going to limit your right to express therapeutic anything when it comes to art expression or any kind of human interaction, I find that kind of dangerous, especially when you're not including all of them, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Any questions for Mr. Correnti? Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman.
I called you Hutchings. You
I
called me
know,
Chairman.
I'm calling you chairman, not chair. I'm sorry. Mr. Correnti, I'd like to thank you for your observation on the bill. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Please come forward. Anybody else that's thinking about it, just queue yourself up, and if you can actually come and join Ms. Lindsay if you'd like. But go ahead and introduce yourself and provide your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Lindsay Semino with the Wyoming Behavioral Health Alliance. We are neutral on this bill. We appreciate what our music therapists in the state are trying to do. I just wanted to offer some clarifying information, answer some questions that have been asked. There is a national accrediting or a National Association for Art Therapy. It's the American Art Therapy Association. And though I appreciate the linking between music therapy and art therapy as both being creative in nature, what differentiates those two modalities when it comes to treatment modalities is whereas art therapy is more psychologically based, it is more based in that clinical mental health realm. The music therapists, as they discussed over the interim, and of course I would defer to their expertise if I get anything wrong, is that they are able to really fit under a broader umbrella, both not just the mental health and psychological PTSD realm, but as they stated, memory work within our elderly, as well as helping with the neurological deficits that come around with Parkinson's disease. And so they are able to dabble, is going to be the clinical word we use today, in different fields and the different needs of those different populations. As far as the concerning language, I would just like to remind the board that that language is pretty standard when it comes to professional protections. The Wyoming Mental Health Licensing Board does have that for licensed professional counselors and for licensed clinical social workers as well. And this is not saying that no one can have music, nobody can make a joke about therapy. It's very much, you are not allowed to imposter that we recognize that this is an accredited profession. And so it really does come down to what would be considered fraud as advertising yourself as something that is not the case. With that, I stand for question.
Thank you, Ms. Semino. Any questions for Ms. Semino? Seeing none. So I will clarify, because the way I understood the comment about the terminology music therapist was, music therapist is a rather generic term. Board certified music therapist is very different. That actually has a connotation of some legitimacy or certification, legitimacy, et cetera. So I don't think it was, I think there's a potential differentiation between the two. One can be used in a more, broader sense, and one is very specific. And I think that's the specificity that I don't mind trying to have in statute, is we mean what we say. So I didn't take it as, saying we don't care about this. I think that term itself might be a little nebulous, if you will, in a general way. Nebulous general, that's double, I'm helping myself out there.
Also a clinical term.
Senator Scott's buying donuts for our next meeting. Oh, dang it, I forgot to, we'll give Senator Scott a moment to stop the ringing in his pocket. All right, a fellow flip phone user had a little bit of a challenge, so go ahead, Senator Scott.
Getting the thing to turn off.
Your mic is on, Senator.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, looking at page 2, lines 17. Page 2, line 17. Musical therapist and board certified musical therapist seem to be used exactly the same, Mr. Chairman. And I wonder about that.
Thank you very much, Senator Scott. I think that was Mr. Correnti's observation potentially as well, and Ms. Semino didn't comment to it directly, but that's fine. Any other questions for Ms. Semino? Questions for Ms. Semino? All right, thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mr.
Anyone
Chairman.
else want to testify to this bill? Anyone else want to testify to this bill? No one? All right. I'm going to give the folks that are remote an opportunity to respond to maybe that musical therapist part of the bill, and see if, and I think what you should probably consider is if striking musical therapist without the qualifying board certified, if that is detrimental to what your purposes are in this bill. So whoever would like to, Dr. Moore, Ms. Camino, either one of you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to respond. This is Dr. Kimberly Senamore. It would be our preference to define what music therapist is. And certainly earlier in the bill, it does that on page 2, lines 3 to 5. It defines in statute what a music therapist means, that it's someone who holds this board certified credential. That said, we are open to considering other options as well. And if I can make one point, please, about the different types of expressive arts therapies. I appreciate that that was brought up, and that was a benefit to the gentleman who testified. And he's correct. There are different professions, as Lindsay said, each with their own scope, their own education and clinical training. There is no really expressive arts therapist. There's no creative arts therapist. There's kind of this umbrella of expressive or creative arts therapies that can include music therapy, or art therapy, or dance movement therapy, or drama therapy. And each of those different therapies are their own profession with their own education, clinical training, and credentialing standards. And the art therapy community in particular are actually seeking their own art therapy specific licenses in different states around the country. So they're kind of involved in this work as well. But taking it specifically to the question of music therapist, it would be our preference to keep that, because again, that is, I am a music therapist. That is who I am. That is what I do. That is what I teach. I train future music therapists, but we are willing to consider other options. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I think what Senator Scott, the point you made was the definition makes those two things equivalent, basically, in the bill, in the verbiage of the bill. So he wasn't dismissing the term music therapist, or he was just saying that music therapist, the way it's defined in the bill, is a board certified person. So we actually have almost a duplicative use of a term that may not be needed. Yeah, anyway, so I hope that clarifies what Senator Scott, I understood Senator Scott to be saying. Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, exactly. And we could leave the bill as is, or we could change the definition to board-certified musical therapist and eliminate the musical therapist language on line 17 and change it down on line 20. You'd still have the protection, but somebody then could say they were a musical therapist. They just couldn't claim they were board-certified musical therapist. And, Mr. Chairman, I would say this is a technique we have used in a number of our licensure bills, particularly where a profession is doing things that other people and other professions will do. Occupational therapist is the one that comes to mind. That's the way their bill read originally, and I think still does, that you can do all the things that an occupational therapist do, but you can't claim to be an occupational therapist and have the professional knowledge of what to do and when to do it that title implies. So it's been an effective technique, and I think the question before us is this something that's worth protecting that way or not? And if so, is the language a little too broad here? Should we narrow it down, or is this fine?
Thank you, Senator Scott. Okay, is there anyone else want to give testimony before the bill? Any other testimony on the bill? Any further questions from any of those who provided testimony from the committee? Nope. All right, no one else, going once, going twice. All right, thank you very much to all those who testified. All right, committee, you have a bill before you, Senate File 36. What's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Just
Yeah,
go through here. In page 2, line 3, would it make sense there to add board certified and then musical therapist to make that clear right there? Board certified means a person that holds an active musical therapist board certified credential. I mean, just to clear that up. Versus the next one says, in line 7 says musical therapist, therapy. I don't know, I'm just helping out.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Crum. So there's different chairmen, I guess, handle this differently, and I called for a motion. We can certainly have general conversation, dry room a motion. We can do it either way. So that's kind of a general conversation type piece. I would think that Senator Scott, I think, is looking for a way to maybe eliminate music therapists down below and putting in board certified is up there. I don't know if that's where the senator's going to go, but yeah, there's some discussion, and so we can have some general discussion about the bill and what you've heard, reservations, et cetera. Or we can work the bill. I generally just work the bill and let people's ideas flow, but we can do it either way. So if we want to just, since this is our first bill, one of our second bill, I guess, to work. If folks want to visit generally about what they want to try to get to, that maybe we can help each other and then get to that place. And if we don't move, if the bill doesn't advance, well, we've done the process, right? We worked the bill. So yeah, Senator, if you will, Senator Hutchings.
Mr. Chairman, my thought is, you're saying let's discuss it before we even find out if we even want to move it.
Well, I'm just giving the option for our
Okay,
newest senator.
For our news, okay.
So he wanted, I mean, I asked for a motion, he said, hey, what about, and we can do it either way.
Either way
I just
works
think-
for me, too.
I just think that, I'm open to either way, but, so what's the committee's pleasure? Does somebody want to make a motion on the bill, or do we want to have a little discussion? Where do we want to go?
I'll make a motion to approve the bill.
Okay, so we have a motion. There's 4 of us, so if we can just work the bill and then decide, we'll vote it up and down at the end, if that makes sense. All right, so let's just work the bill real quickly. Any amendments on page 1? Page 2, Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, I have a further question. Did the interim committee hear any recommendation that we needed to define what the certification board for musical therapists was Or was that discussed in the interim committee?
Mr. Chairman, after you brought that up, I went back through our meeting minutes and looked at the draft bills we'd had in the previous, and none of them included a definition of who that certification board is, at least what I could find. I went quickly, looked at 2 or 3 documents that we considered during the interim. None of them had that language in there. So I apologize, that's probably a fault of ours on us, but we did not, it was not ever part of our discussion that I could find or recall. Senator Hutchings.
Mr. Chair, is it allowed to bring up some of the concern during the interim committee on this bill?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Thank
do you have any amendments? First of all, let's actually clear the deck
Okay.
on amendments. Are there any amendments? Any amendments, page 2? No. Go ahead, Senator Crum?
Mr. Chairman, on page 2, on line 3, I would move an amendment to add board-certified musical therapists there, because that's really what we're talking about. And then back on Senator Scott's question, Mr. Chairman, I would ask, and again, since we heard through testimony, there's really no enforcement. At this time, we're just making definitions. I would make a amendment that we would just strike all of A, starting on line 15 through line 23, there's no real enforcement, so why make it unlawful if there's no real enforcement? And then my understanding that we've got other bills that are coming, and maybe at that point, when there's more meat around the bones, that would fit in another bill. But it seems like we're just trying to make a definition, and there's no really anything unlawful.
Okay, so on the amendment is 2 parts. I'm just going to make sure I understand. The first part of it is to add board certified in front of music therapists. That's on line 3.
Yes.
Inside the quotation. The second part of your amendment is to strike basically 102 from the bill. Is that
Well,
accurate?
Mr. Chairman, I'd leave part B, because it says this chapter does not prohibit a person from using. I'd leave B.
All right, that's the motion before you, committee. Senator Scott, I saw your hand.
Mr. Chairman, I would think that if we didn't have A in here, we don't have a bill. Just a definition doesn't necessarily make a bill that does anything. This is enforceable with an injunction. And that's how you would enforce it if you had to. It's perhaps the mildest form of enforcement, but there is a mechanism there, Mr. Chairman. So,
Thank you, Senator Scott.
do you want the amendment divided?
I was going to ask you if you want to divide the amendment. We'll have that exercise right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would divide out the.
So the division will be, Division 1 will be the board certification, adding board certified on line 3, and the second division will be the striking of A, which is lines 15 through the end of that page. I believe, yes, the end of that page, 15 through 23. So we'll take Division 1 first. Any discussion on Division 1, which is add boarding certified into that language?
Mr. Chairman, if this passes and the second half doesn't, we'll have to come back and amend the.
Yes. Okay. On the Division 1, board certified, on line 3, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. All right, so we are adding, I want to make sure that we have it with our staff, board certified in front of music therapist, excuse me. Now we're on Division 2, which is striking lines, actually, it's going to be 15 through 23, because we need the exception language, the title language for that. So 15 through 23. Discussion on that? Nope. All those in favor of that motion, please, or that division of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no?
No.
No. So it's a tie vote. That means that it fails. The motion will fail on that one. Senator Scott, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would then move on page 2, line 17, strike the words music therapist, comma, and on page 2, line 20, after person is a, insert the words board certified. So it would read person is a board certified musical therapist.
Okay. Understand the motion. It is to strike music therapist, comma, on line 17, and on line 20, insert board certified in front of music therapist. The same as what we did with the definition. Questions on the amendment? Everybody understand the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Yes, sir, please.
Mr. Chairman, on page 2, after line 11, insert 3 little I to read certification board for musical therapist means the National Certification Board for Musical Therapists.
So the board means what the board means.
Well, yeah, Mr. Chairman, but you capitalize the second one, you're talking about a specific board. They may eventually give us a little better definition of who they are. But that gives us, that puts it in the bill and says we are talking about that national board.
Okay, so does everyone understand? It'd be three small romanettes on page, or line 12, basically, page 2. Certification boards for musical therapy means, and then this will be capitalized with quotes around it, et
The
cetera,
National Certification Board
for musical therapists. All right, any discussion on that amendment? Discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Amendment is adopted. So we are now well amended. Further amendments. So I'm going to throw out an amendment for my colleagues to think about. And this actually is going to flip the bill from making it an unlawful bill to making it a lawful bill. And what this would entail would be, and I've discussed this with the proponents because, anyway, for a variety of reasons, but this would strike "un" from lawful, line 15. First thing I did, so then we read that it is lawful. And then on line 20, instead of unless, it would be, is it make when the person, so it's going from exclusionary to inclusionary. So strike unless, insert when, and then the final one is, I think that's actually adequate enough now with what with my colleague Senator Scott did with that new definition, saying the board is the board. So, so it would now read, it is lawful for a person to be a musical therapist or advertise out to the public as a certified musical therapist. Actually, we need to do a cleanup amendment there. Board certified, et cetera, when the person holds this credential. So that's what it does. And to complete that amendment, I think we need to actually put certified music therapist in front of, or board certified in front of music therapist on line 16. I'm just going to complete it out. So it's clean all the way through.
Yes.
So and I understand that flips this bill from a, you can't do it, to these are the people that can do it. And then, and I don't know what that does to the legal standing, Senator Scott, but that's at least, I just want to give the body, my colleagues, another approach to this that might be, at least it's an alternate. Senator Crum.
Mr. Chairman, this is why you're the chairman, but this does exactly what I was trying to do earlier, so thank you.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, I think I would resist that. Because I think it's ambiguous. If you say it's lawful for somebody to do that, is the converse true, that is unlawful for somebody who is not a board certified musical therapist to do the things that musical therapists do? And I'm hesitant to predict how a court might rule if somebody brought an action on that.
Sure.
I think that making it, just saying it's lawful to do it, it's probably lawful now because there's no law against it. You put a positive law in there, the courts are likely to say, what are you trying to do? And it looks like a backdoor way to make it unlawful to do those things. And I think that would be a big step too far.
Thank you, Senator Scott. And Senator Crum, that's why I've not been a chairman very long.
That's right.
You've been chairman long.
And further discussion?
The question is,
Senator
Mr.
Hutchings.
Chairman, are you gonna withdraw it, your motion, or do
No,
we have to
actually,
vote on it?
I want the committee to actually reject my
Okay.
motion, so let's just get it.
Okay,
All those in favor of Barlow's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no?
No.
All right, Barlow's amendment is out. I'm going to offer a second amendment, though, to insert board certified in front of music therapist on line
16.
16.
gotcha.
Gotcha.
Discussion on that? Discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. All right, that amendment is adopted. Effective date, any language on page 3 anybody wants to amend? I think I'm going to amend on line 5, also insert board certified in front of music therapist. We're going to be, we should just be consistent throughout. All right, any discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, hold
Mr.
on
Chairman.
just a second. Why, Mr. Chairman, let's put the board certified in, then I have a further question.
Go ahead with the motion then, Senator Scott.
Okay, just to put board certified in front of music therapist
Yes.
on page 3, line 5.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Adopted, you got that? All right, next. Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, chairman shall not prohibit a person from using music in the performance of a person's profession or occupation. Why do we need the profession? Why do we need the language, performance of a person's profession or occupation? Why is it restricted to that? Why can't anybody? You don't have to have a profession or occupation to use music.
So,
So-
Mr. Chairman, you would actually strike from the word in
Down
to occupation?
to occupation.
Okay,
So
it would-
read, this chapter shall not prohibit a person from using music if the person does not represent that they are a board certified musical therapist.
all right, discussion? I mean, it seems reasonable to me.
I'll move that.
Motion, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? All right, Clayton, you got that? All right, we're cutting this bill. We're gonna have a one-page bill if we get this out of committee. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on the bill? Now, just general discussion on the bill. Senator Hutchings.
Number one, and this is just my personal preference, I would rather not work a bill that hasn't been moved and voted on a second, and I don't think we did that. If I'm in error, let me know. But during the summer, I remember during our first committee, when we heard this, we voted no. And we left out of that committee, and then the next city, if I'm in error, let me know, they were back. And it's like, whoa, what happened here? How come you're back when we voted against this? And apparently I was told, and I could be wrong, that one of the chairmen made the decisions to bring them back for us to hear more information, and then they came to give us more information, and then before we knew it, there was a bill being drafted out of just an informational session, not a, hey, we've already said no. So I was a little disturbed by that, because I was a no, and I'm still a no on this. I just don't think this is something we need to do right now, just to validate someone's desire to be a musical therapist. I think people going in and out of hospitals, providing this kind of music, they haven't been prohibited, so why make a law to do this? That's just my opinion, Mr. Chair. So if you have any response as to why this came back, I'd love to know.
Thank you, Senator Hutchins. So I guess what the 67th did, I know the result of that, and that was a committee bill that came to the 68th. Why or how or what occurred in that, I was not a chairman then. We were not in that capacity, so I cannot speak to the process issues, but I know the process is now the president introduced a bill, sent it to this committee, and I feel that we can work that bill, and certainly you get to vote from whether it's on just the bill before you, like two other of our members, that's all they have is a bill before them.
Okay.
You have some background, which leads you to it doesn't change your opinion on the bill, but it has more information for you. So I can't speak to what they did. I know what we have before us, Senate File 36, as multiply amended at this point. There was a motion earlier on the broad bill, and I apologize. And so further discussion on the bill, further discussion. All right, seeing none, will you please take a roll call vote on Senate File 36?
This is a roll call vote for Senate File 36 as amended. Senator Crum,
Aye.
Senator Hutchings,
No.
Senator Scott,
Aye.
Senator Simons,
Excused?
Chairman Barlow.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 3 ayes, 1 no, and 1 excused.
Thank you very much, committee. So I'll visit, I'm not going to ask Senator Hutchins to carry this bill. But I'll discuss with my colleagues, and if no one else wants to take, or no one else is interested in taking it, I'll take it. I'll represent it as we've talked about it today, and no harm in that. Again, for Wednesday, we will do the same thing we did today. Hopefully, it'll be 30 minutes upon noon recess to give you a chance to have lunch and go to any receptions. We'll have 2 bills before us. One is the immunity bill, which was a committee bill, and the second bill will be the certificate of need. That'll be Senator Crum's bill. And just a heads up for the public, that in the committee, Senator Beitman informed me on Thursday that we are going to be getting bills that are not potentially in the labor, health, and social services field, because other committees have a lot of bills, and I think we only have maybe one other bill right now that's been introduced that might come our way as a matter of course. So, and I don't even know about that because it has not been assigned yet. So we may see some things we are not used to. We'll maybe work those a little slower since they're not areas that we generally deal with, but we're for that. Any further business for the committee? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Mr. Caldwell, you let me know what I need to do. Thank you for those who testified. Thank you for those who are online. Appreciate you.
Well, it's lawful now.